What's up, gang? Welcome to the Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius Mirshahzadeh. I'm so pumped to have you here with me. Now listen, the Greatness Machine, we're about two things. Number one, people who are living their passions. And number two, those who are creating greatness in the world and doing both of these things despite the odds against them. Each episode, we're going to feature interviews with game changers, business leaders, telling us their origin stories, what made them tick, what got them to where they are now. Why? So it can help you step into your greatness within your life, your business, and your career. Occasionally, you might hear a few solo episodes from myself, moi, as I say, as I leverage my 20 years of entrepreneurship as a CEO and founder to help you grow and level up in your journey to scale your life and your business. So, come be a fly on the wall, enjoy the conversation, and I'm stoked to have you here with me. What's up, everybody? Welcome to today's episode of The Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius Mirshahzadeh. Man, I'm flying solo. Flying solo today, baby. And I wanted to take some time today to talk about something that's near and dear to my heart. I've talked about this a lot on the shows in the past, but it's around this idea of trying to live a life of not being anxious, not having anxiety. And I saw this really cool post yesterday on Instagram by Ryan Holiday, and I'm a pretty big fan of Ryan Holiday. I've been following his work for a couple years now. To the point where I'm like basically always digging in. I'm always reading his new books right when they come out. So if you haven't checked out Ryan Holiday, I highly recommend it. And he had a post that came out yesterday by all the great Stoics around anxiety. And I was like, yeah, I like that. That's pretty solid. And I read the post and I was like, this is something that I can get behind. And I thought today we would kind of spend some time going through the post he had and really, look at this in a way of how do you think about anxiety in your life? What are the ways that you look at it? And how do you actually think about it when you think of yourself and how you're going to live your life without trying to be anxiety ridden, and that was something that I thought was interesting. So it's called A Stoic's Response to Anxiety. It's in the Daily Stoics. I highly recommend you check out Daily Stoic on Instagram. But we're going to read each one, and I want to kind of talk through my thoughts on these different topics because I'm a person that has to work pretty hard to manage my anxiety. I have a lot of tools in my tool belt. And there's a quote around this, which what we resist persists. And I guess maybe I'm just a person that resists a lot of stuff in my life, and it ruminates and it goes round and round. And then before I know it, boom, I tend to spiral. I goes into the monkey brain and I obsess about it until I can figure it out. And sometimes there's nothing to figure out. It's just kind of accepting things for what they are. So we're gonna read some of these. The first quote is by Marcus Aurelius, former Roman Empire, which is, "Today I escaped anxiety, or no, I discarded it because it was within me, in my own perceptions, not outside." And that kind of goes back to what I was just saying a moment ago, which is it's a choice to engage with fear. It's a choice to engage with what could go wrong. It's a choice to engage with what we don't like and to ruminate on it. And to, I don't know if you're a type of person that does this, but I'm a type of person where I will literally have an internal argument with somebody over something that I feel wronged about, or that they don't understand, or that I think that they're not doing what I want them to do. And I will have hundreds of arguments with that person and never even say one word to them in real life about it. Or maybe I will at some point after having hundreds and hundreds of arguments. And I'm like, that is just suffering at its worst. So this is an example of me not just discarding it. I mean, like, it is what it is. I'll deal with it when I have to, if I have to. So I thought that was, I love that quote. And there's a few quotes in here that we're going to go through, but that was one where I was like, yeah, I do that. And the answer is very simple. I don't escape it. I discard it. Go. We're done. In the trash. Like, I'm going to go be present and not sit in the car ruminating. And this happens to me sometimes. I'll sit in the car ruminating on something. My son, my 15-year-old son, sitting next to me. I'm not talking to him. I'm not present with him. I'm in my own thoughts, buried in my own thoughts, just grinding through a scenario, a work scenario, a life scenario, as opposed to being present in the moment, enjoying some music with my son Rumi. And this happened yesterday where I was like, man, what are you doing? Stop it. be present with the roomie. So think to yourself, are you escaping anxiety or are you actually discarding it? So I thought that was a great quote by Marcus Aurelius. Next one is by Epictetus, who is one of my favorite Stoics. Man is not worried by real problems so much as by his imagined anxieties about real problems. So man is not worried about real problems so much as by his imagined anxieties about real problems. So like, think about that. Like, I'm actually not worried about the problem. I'm worried about the fear of the problem. Huh. I love Epictetus. Like, just like, I'm like, man, like if I could have dinner with somebody, it would be Epictetus for sure. And it's like, think about all the problems that you have in your life, and then think about how you're approaching it. Is it from a logical standpoint of, hey, how do I solve that problem? Or how do I just like live with that problems or sit with that problem? Like, hey, I don't have a solution to it right now. I'm not going to be able to fix that problem. So I'm good, but discard it, as Marcus Aurelius says, for now, or put it in the parking lot, come back to it. Or am I ruminating on solving the problem and triangulating, square rooting a solution and feeling damned, like, oh, that person did me wrong, and all the side stories of that actual problem. And so this is one of the ones where I was like, man. And by the way, I fall into the trap of all these things, so and you may as well. But it's I love the Stoics. I read Stoicism a lot because I feel like it grounds me in like, hey, there's monkey brain Darius that swirls on stuff, and then there's just straight up truth. Like, the truth is, like, a problem's a problem. There's a quote I love, which is, a problem is not a problem if money can solve it. But that's the problem, and like, okay, it is. Versus, that's the problem, and here's how I feel about it, and here's why that person did me dirty, and I'm not going to stand for that, and here's how I can get back at them, and all the stories we start to like tell ourselves, right? So I thought that was Epictetus for the win once again. Let's go to the next one, though, which is by Seneca. We are more often frightened than hurt. We suffer more from imagination than from reality. This goes back to what we're talking about before. There's a quote that, or there's a study done by Psychology Today about like what percentage of things actually go wrong that we think are going to go wrong, and the numbers like it's almost nothing. It's like 89%, I think, of things that we expect to go wrong in a study never even happen, right? And of the 10 or 15% that do, it's like 83% of people that when it happened to them, and I'm picking numbers out of the air, but they're pretty close to what the study said I was able to deal with it. So we are more often frightened than hurt. We suffer more from imagination than from reality. And if you start thinking about it, every time we suffer from imagination, we are just taking a knife and stabbing ourselves, self-inflicted wounds, right? Like imagining the worst outcomes that hardly ever happen, and when they happen, we can handle them. Being worried, being scared, when the reality is you're gonna make it through it. Probably it's not gonna be as bad. If it is, you can handle it. But we live in our brains as opposed to in our bodies and being present. And this is just something where I look at that and I go, yeah, I don't want to live a life of fear. I'm okay with, like, think about when you're hurt. You're like, you just kind of deal with it and move on, But fear is just this virus that swirls in our brains and in our bodies and takes over us. And right now, when you look at what's happening in the world today, and depending on what side of the political spectrum you're on, there's a lot of fear going on. And I see it more now than ever before. And I'm like, I'm choosing to not engage in this. Like, especially if it's something I can't control. Like, now, take that same thought exercise as I said it out loud. And I'm like, I don't do that in my personal life so well. I do it actually pretty well at politics. I don't do it so well in my personal life. I tend to like swirl and obsess about the things that could go wrong. So this is a moment where you just get centered and say, what can I control? What can't I? Maybe surrender to the higher power that like what will happen, and it'll make me better and stronger. So I thought that was a really interesting quote from Seneca. And it's funny when I read this yesterday morning, I was like, oh, I'm going to do a solo on this because I loved all these quotes. And I was like, I'd love to have a conversation with you all about this. Next one is also a Seneca quote, which is, true happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence upon the future. The future is what it's going to be. And when you're there, you may be obsessing about the next future. But when we say true happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence upon the future, that's about being present. I did it. There's a solo I did a while ago, which is like, life is just like about the next 10 seconds, right? What's going to happen in the next 10 seconds is your life. But we tend, and again, I'm a C minus, maybe even D student on some of this stuff. I'm always living in the future, planning for the future. And for me, it's really around, being in the moment, getting present, not having anxious dependence upon the future, because the future is out of your control. You don't know what's going to happen. I talked about this 2 weeks ago on my solo. My good friend Rick Sapio passed away. I doubt 2.5 years ago, had you told him what his future was going to be like, he would have believed you, that he wouldn't be here now. My friend John Rulin that passed away in August, he wouldn't believe you now. My friend Robert Ellis, who passed away at the end of the year, he might have believed you because he was terminal. But the point with this is that, and I'll tell you with Robert, I'm going to do a solo on him soon. That guy lived so blissfully towards the end. It was so impressive to see him just like embrace his reality and just suck the marrow out of the bone of life at the end. His last few years on this planet. So it's like, what can I do to be more present? What can I do to be here now, in the now, with the people I love, looking them in the eyes, like connecting with their souls? What can I do to enjoy the moment, listen to the song, dance the slow dance, enjoy that bite of food? Have gratitude for what is, not what might be. That when I'm there, if I'm that person, by the way, that's doing that, that's constantly living in the future, then even if I get what I want, I'll be living for the next want. So it's really around living for the current present moment. And I'll put a link in the show notes to my show about the 10-second rule, which is really, I talk a lot about this because it's something that I realized over the last few years. And I think the Stoics and all the famous mystics, because they're so thoughtful, so smart. And I encourage you, if you haven't really paid attention to these thought leaders, it's just go out there and just check it out. It's it's so grounding and like what life really is all about. Let's go to the next one. Don't let your reflection on the whole sweep of life crush you. Don't fill your mind with all the bad things that might still happen. Stay focused on the present situation. In Marcus Aurelius. So this kind of, again, this is like not getting caught up in our monkey brain of what could be and what might be and who did what and why did they do that and, oh my God, this could happen and that could happen, and if that happens, what's going to happen, and this is this bad thing, and all these things these stories we tell ourselves constantly. And it's like, that's not life. That's your imagination, and you're living a life of suffrage in that imagination of what could be, when the reality is you're here now. Live the now, And what I find with the Stoics that I love is it's like there's not a lot, they don't have a lot of ideas, but they're consistent and they all are simple. And it's just around, how do I live a good life? And I'm not going to be here that long. So how do I maximize this so that it's fulfilled? And I think that when I start thinking about the Greatness Machine, the show is around me. It's really like a puzzle for me to figure out, how do I live a great life? And I want to learn from people who I think are doing really interesting things that exemplify that. And so if you're a listener to the show, just know that that's why I'm doing it. It's like, I just get to learn from these really cool people, and like, how do they figure this out? Why are they doing what they're doing? How does that make them a better person? Because this is around just living fulfillment. Let's go to the next one. Another Epictetus. When I see an anxious person, I ask myself, what do they want? For if a person wasn't wanting something outside of their control, why would they be stricken by anxiety? Again, this is like this is kind of it's almost like, wait, did Epictetus and Buddha like hang out together and have like a cup of coffee or something? It's like, how can I live a life without want? Because again, this goes back to this idea of like, if I didn't want something outside of my control, then I probably wouldn't be anxious. What do you want that's outside of your control, and why are you trying to control it? And this is, again, when you hear me say this, don't think that I'm some enlightened person. I'm a person that constantly does this stuff, but has to remind myself by reading quotes, by spending, 15, 20 minutes like I'm doing right now, talking about it, so I can just help program my brain to be like, hey, dude, quit wanting things that you don't have control over. Just go be. Go be who you're supposed to be in the world. Go be around the right people. Go create awesome things. And the cards will fall where they may. Go try to live a life of intention instead of a life of want. Oh, I want, because I will tell you this, and we talked about this in many, many of our shows. The minute you get, you'll want something else. That programming exists no matter what. The bar will just move. And that's just, that's being on the hedonic treadmill. Talk about that a lot in our shows. So how can I want less? How can I just be more? I think that's a really important idea. And I think it's something that as we start to look at these Stoics, like, man, they had it and they figured it out. And so I highly encourage you, to check out the works of the Stoics. All right, we got a couple more and we'll keep going here. Marcus Aurelius, the first step, don't be anxious. Nature controls it all. The second step, concentrate on what you have to do. Fix your eyes on it. Remind yourself that your task is to be a good human being. So, I mean, man, like, mic drop by our man Marcus Aurelius. Don't be anxious. I mean, I should make a bumper sticker and just put it on my chest. Nature controls it all. And I think what he's referring to is like, and depending on what your belief system is, I mean, I am a firm believer in higher power. This is like, you're not in control, man. Nature is in control. God's in control, not you. Your job is to show up, know what you have to do, fix your eyes on it, and remind yourself that just be a good human. Be a good human. Simple as that. What does that mean? Show love to others. Don't take more than you give. Give way more than you take. Be generous. Be present in the moment. Focus on what needs to get done right now and go do that. And quit worrying about what might be. Because as we know, nature controls it all. It probably isn't going to happen the way you thought it's going to. And even when it does, you're not going to think about it the way you think about it when you don't have it. So again, man, these guys, it's like I read this stuff and I'm like, oh, so good. You guys are so good. And so, those are all the quotes that we got from our friends, the Stoics. But Ryan Holiday I'm a huge fan of his. You can check him out on the Daily Stoic. But when I read all this stuff, it's always a reminder to me of what is the life that I want to live? How do I want to live that life? How do I want to show up to be the best version of myself? And like, as I read through all those, like, there was a lot of redundancy, but it's very simple. Be present in the moment. How do I want to show up? Be generous with those around me. Don't sit there and want for things I don't have control over. Understand that, like, it is what it is, right? Life is what it is. And it's around how do you show up to be the best version of yourself every single day so that you can, be fulfilled, be present in the moment. Don't let the monkey brain tell you stories, right? And it's going to, we're wired to do it. You're here by the way, you are here. The reason you are here on this earth walking around is because that monkey brain was what's called fear of loss aversion, was really, 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 really scared about losing stuff like food, like its life, like the rustling in the bushes, and it was protecting you against saber-toothed tigers and mammoths and, jaguars and whatever the hell was out in the jungles and the savannas of early man. And all the way till, probably up to 100 years ago when we were in a more of a modern industrial society. And that loss aversion brain over hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years, protected you. It's why you're here. So you're fighting biology, which is why we are anxious, which is why we are worried about these things that probably are never going to happen. But that's suffrage. That's that's suffering through life, And what I've realized for myself, and again, I'm a C- student, is like, I know what to do, but I'm not great at doing it. So what I find is reading this type of stuff reminds me, it imprints on my brain what is true, gives me something to anchor to when I start spiraling out of control, start worrying about stuff, grounds me, gives me a moment of pause, reminds me that the Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor, thought like this, who had every problem in the world, literally, to deal with. Yet he was able to remind himself. And my guess is he was doing the same things you and I are doing, wanting things he couldn't have and suffering, and had to write these things out for himself in his journal, meditation, so that he could, get centered and get grounded, get back to truly what mattered. And so I empower you to do a couple things. Number one, I empower you to, start to look at, I tell everyone, my son, my youngest son is going to junior high school next year. And my wife's like, oh, should you take a philosophy class? And I said, yes. I think I love the Stoics. There's plenty of great philosophers, but it's something where I got introduced to it later in life. And I'm like, I love the Stoics. I think Ryan Holiday, you can start with ego is the enemy, or you can start with the obstacle is the way, but I love his work. I think he really makes it entertaining and digestible. So I highly recommend checking out Ryan Holiday's work. And Ryan, if you're ever listening to this, I really want to interview you. But yeah, I think like starting with some digestible Stoicism is a really good way to just like A, learn, B, be entertained, and C, gives you something to ground into. B, it's being meditative. I mean, I think for me, meditation's been a really good source of being able to pay attention, like what's happening upstairs. And so I've used meditation as a tool combined with these kind of philosophies around Stoicism to just observe myself, you know, to take a step back, to get quiet. And we had a guest on the show, Paul Chak, who was a freaking incredible guest. We're going to air his show here in a couple months, but he was talking about the 4 doctors: Dr. Movement, Dr. Diet, Dr. Quiet. Right. And I'm forgetting the 4th one right now, but we'll be talking about that on the show. But Dr. Quiet, you know, one of the main doctors, is there quiet in your life for you to actually just pay attention to what's going on upstairs? And if what's going on upstairs is anxiety and fear and what bad things are going to happen that you don't have control over, then you know at least where the programming is starting, so that you can take a step back and be like, that's not really helping. Am I being present? Ask yourself those questions. And so I empower you to take a moment of pause. It can be, and by the way, if you're doing meditation, I always teach a lot of CEOs this. I go, look, people say, I hate meditating, or I'm bad at it. I used to say, 2 things in this world I hate: meditation and hiking. And I actually like both of them now, because hiking is a form of meditation. And I love meditation purely because it gives me a moment to quiet my brain and start looking at some of these questions these Stoics are saying in my own way and observing what's happening upstairs. And then grounding in the fact that, is this helping me or not? Is this making my life better or not? And if it's not, which it's not, and trust me, if you're not just being present in the moment, then it's one of the things we just talked about. Then what am I doing to reduce the suffering in my life, to be a better human, to show up for those I love, and start to, as Marcus Aurelius says, narrow my eyes on that and go do the work. Right. So with that said, that was a lot, I know, but it was a great post, and I was like, man, I want to share this with the audience, because it really made my morning when I read it a couple of days ago, and I thought it would be something that I could share with y'all and you'd appreciate. With that said, appreciate you. I love you. Be present. Be there for those you love. Don't worry about what's going to happen there or not going to happen that you don't have control over. And until next time, peace out. Love you.
She's my lover.
You are listening to The Greatness Machine, and that's a wrap for today. Listen, if you love what you heard, subscribe to the show on whatever podcast platform that you're tuning in on, so that you don't miss any of our future episodes. We have tons of great people coming on, and we're stoked to have you here to enjoy it with us. Leave us a review. Tell us what you love most about this particular episode. We love getting the reviews. We love to see what you guys love most. And if this particular episode, made you think of someone who's leveling up in their business and in their life, print screen, share it with them. Leaders are the best givers. And after all, we're all here to support and grow with each other. And in case you want to see some of the fun behind the scenes shots or some of the things that we're doing, I'm actually writing about this in my weekly newsletter. Go to www.therealdarius.com and subscribe to my newsletter. We're talking about fun things like business and life and mindfulness and cryptocurrencies and gosh, I don't even know, everything and anything, but it's tons of fun stuff I write about. I try to get it out on a weekly basis. You can subscribe at www.therealdarius.com. And with that said, look, thank you guys so much. I appreciate you. I love you. Peace. We're out of here. See you guys on the next one.
She's my lover.